Chapter 141. The elders of the Shimura clan are arrested by the Anbu. Narashikaku rubbed his temples and shook his head. That's about it, he said. Shimura Richu was training outside the village near a farmer's field. Two villagers heard movement in the forest, went to investigate, and were caught in the ninjutsu he released. Shikaku couldn't say whether it had been deliberate or an accident. He only knew the broad strokes. The actual investigation was being handled by Anbu, and the third Hokage had been informed. He had been given no chance to intervene. Whether it was intentional is not the point now, Jingi said. Bringing him in is what matters. Jingi set the file down with studied casualness. The records in it mattered only as an excuse. Much like Tsunade had once used her authority to order the Hyuga elders into Anbu custody, Jingi had found his pretext. Tiger, take your men and bring him in. Yes, sir. Two Anbu squads mobilized at once. Shimura Richu is an elder of the Shimura clan, Shikaku warned. They won't hand him over willingly. He was right. Tsunade had been able to order the Hyuga elders detained because of her particular status. Jingi did not possess the same standing. The Shimura clan had long been the Sarutobi family's vanguard. They would be expected to stand firm by the third Hokage. If Jingi tried to seize one of their elders, the Hokage's office would almost certainly intervene. Jingi had counted on that. He even welcomed escalation. If the Hokage stepped in, it would expose the wider struggle over Anbu privileges. Order all personnel in the village to assemble, Jingi commanded. All those on leave must return. Prepare for full deployment. Anbu personnel answered the call. Tiger led his squads to the Shimura clan grounds and announced briskly, by order of the deputy chief, Shimura Richu is requested to come to Anbu to assist with an investigation. When Anbu had been directly under the Hokage, an Anbu arrival often meant errands for the office. This time, it meant something worse. The Shimura chief's face darkened. He saw a pattern, Jingi's retaliation for the meeting, the same sort of public humiliation that had been visited on the Hyuga. Excuse me, the chief demanded. What crime has Shimura Richu committed? Why must he assist in an Anbu investigation? Tiger offered no explanation. He did not need to. Anbu did not owe explanations to anyone but the Hokage. Please hand him over. Impossible, the chief snapped. Our clan will not surrender him. I've already sent for the Hokage to come and defend our clansmen. If the Shimura clan allowed an elder to be taken without the Hokage's intervention, they would become the village's next embarrassment. The Hyuga had been ridiculed after their elders were swept into Anbu custody. The chief sent a clansman running to the Hokage's office. The messenger burst into the building where Hiruzen Sarutobi was reading. Hokage-sama, Anbu are at the clan grounds to arrest Elder Richu. The chief asks you to come and stand for the clan and the elder. Hiruzen's documents thudded to the table. He was stunned. Anbu at the Shimura clan? This was exactly what he'd feared. Jingi's retaliation for the attempt to curb Anbu's authority. He had expected resistance, but not so soon. The meeting had barely ended before the counterattack came. He could not allow the Shimura clan to be humiliated. If he did not protect them now, not only would the Sarutobi name suffer, but so would the village's faith in its Hokage. Without hesitation, he left the office. If a conflict broke out on the clan grounds, even his intervention would become messy. He moved as quickly as he could. At the Shimura estate, Anbu were already drawn and ready. The air was taut enough to snap. Just as a fight seemed about to erupt, a voice cut through the tension. Stop! The third Hokage arrived in time. Seeing no blood yet spilled, he exhaled in relief. The Anbu lowered their blades. Though Anbu were no longer directly under the Hokage's personal command, Hiruzen still held the authority of the office. Hokage-sama! The Shimura chief cried, the presence of his protector giving him a rush of confidence. Anbu came and tried to take an elder for investigation. It's unreasonable. Hiruzen raised a hand and quieted him. He looked at Tiger and the men of the Anbu. State your purpose and present your orders. Tiger inclined his head a fraction in deference to Hiruzen, but remained composed. Hokage-sama, we received a report. 2 villagers were involved in an incident of ninjutsu near a field adjacent to the training area used by Shimura Richu. We were sent to bring him in to assist the investigation. Hiruzen's eyes narrowed. Who authorized this action? Deputy Chief Jingi, Tiger answered. Instructions came from the Anbu office. We were to bring Shimura Richu in for questioning. Hiruzen folded his hands and turned to the Shimura chief. Did you receive any summons? Has anyone from Anbu contacted the clan first? No, the chief said. They simply came and demanded him. I sent a messenger to you immediately. Hiruzen stepped forward between the two groups. I will hear the facts and make a decision, but there will be no arrest on clan grounds without my express order. If there is evidence, bring it to my office. We will bring Shimura Richu to the Hokage's chambers to be questioned under my supervision. He will not be dragged off to Anbu custody here. Jingi's plan to provoke a public showdown had been anticipated. He scowled behind the Anbu line, but he had no direct voice where the Hokage stood. Tiger shifted, caught between a deputy's orders and the Hokage's command. We have procedures to follow, Tiger said carefully. If the deputy chief has ordered his detainment, the deputy chief's orders do not supersede the Hokage's authority on matters carried out inside the village, Hiruzen replied calmly. If Anbu has evidence, present it to me. If not, you will stand down and return to headquarters. I will oversee any questioning. Understand? There was a charged silence while Jingi's men considered it. The Shimura chief visibly relaxed, though he kept his guard up. Tiger met the Hokage's gaze and then inclined his head, the decision made for him. Very well, Hokage-sama. We will bring the matter to your office. Jingi's jaw tightened. He had wanted a spectacle to force Hiruzen's hand, to paint the Hokage as weak or complicit. The third's quick intervention had snuffed that option out for now. But Jingi was not easily deterred. He could recall his orders, regroup, and press the issue differently. Escort Shimura Richu to the Hokage's office under minimal guard and no restraints, Hiruzen said. I will speak with him, review any evidence, and determine the next step. Any use of force without my approval will be treated as an act against the village. Yes, Hokage-sama, Tiger answered. As the Anbu prepared to move, the Shimura chief bowed deeply to Hiruzen, gratitude evident on his face. The clan would be spared public humiliation for the moment, and the elder would be questioned under the Hokage's supervision rather than hauled away to Anbu detention. Jingi watched them go, his expression unreadable. He had been blocked this time, but the struggle over Anbu's scope and the village's institutions was far from over. He turned his attention to the wider mobilization he had already ordered. The pieces were still in motion. This would not be the end of the matter, only its next stage. Tiger, why did the Anbu seize an elder of the Shimura clan? Tiger lowered his head slightly. Hokage-sama, I was only following the deputy director's orders. I don't know the full details. Not even willing to disclose the mission, the third Hokage's expression darkened as he looked at his old subordinate. I'll take this matter into my own hands. Go back and tell Jingi this operation ends here. Yes, Tiger bowed. Recall the team. Tiger didn't hesitate. Since they couldn't apprehend the target now, he would bring the squad back and relay the third Hokage's orders. Under Tiger's command, the Anbu assembled again, left the Shimura clan lands, and returned to headquarters. The mission had failed, but Jingi didn't seem upset. The Sarutobi and Shimura clan territories lay too close to the Hokage's office. Any disturbance would bring the third Hokage down on them immediately. A failed operation was almost inevitable under those conditions. You understand the difficulty, but the operation still must happen. Jingi's voice carried in the meeting room. Keep the team on standby. The Anbu will undertake a major operation tonight. Behind his mask, Tiger's pupils narrowed. A full-scale push? Was Jingi really going this far? If you insist on arresting someone from the Shimura, it'll be hard to succeed. The distance is too short. Hokage-sama can show up at any time. Nara Shikaku said helplessly. A public arrest would only draw the third Hokage, and their work would be stopped as soon as it began. Jingi sat at his desk, turning pages in a file. I know. Shikaku's warning died in his throat. He'd already suspected what Jingi intended. If a single arrest could be prevented by the Hokage, then keep trying until the Hokage had to react every time. If the Anbu mobilized repeatedly, encircling the Shimura lands, then the Sarutobi lands, then others, the Hokage office would be forced to run after them, day after day. The repeated mobilizations would wear everyone down and give Jingi the chance to reorganize the Anbu and root out those still loyal to the Hokage office. He wanted to gradually replace personnel the Hokage trusted. Senior, Jingi said suddenly, have you considered selecting people from the Ino Shikacho to bring into the Anbu to take some of the administrative posts? Shikaku blinked. How many are you thinking? There are quite a few nin in Ino Shikacho. We could replace the Anbu administrative staff, but where would the displaced personnel go? The Anbu was a special, independent department. Jingi intended to take the administrative reins first and move in carefully, select Ino Shikacho members to replace existing staff, then gradually change the operational appointments. Only those who passed multiple layers of screening should enter the Anbu, elite shinobi with exceptional abilities, clean backgrounds, and suitable personalities. Tsunade had struggled to find a reliable method. Jingi was taking the task on. I've worked out the details, Jingi continued. I'll put them into the logistics and pharmaceutical sections at first. For interrogation work, I want the Yamanaka clan to take charge. There's nobody better for that in the village. A sensible plan. Shikaku didn't refuse. Letting the Ino Shikacho put people into the Anbu would strengthen their position. Since they had sided with Tsunade, they'd been squeezed at court and lost posts to Sarutobi and Shimura allies. These Anbu appointments would be a benefit. Administrative posts in the Anbu came with top-tier treatment and privileges, even if they weren't in the action squads. Give me 3 days, Shikaku said finally. I'll arrange 20 people. Thank you, Senior. Jingi rose and left the office to attend other matters. On the administrative side, the replacements would begin. On the action side, personnel would be changed gradually and only after careful selection. With that done, Jingi stopped by the logistics department. Sir, the logistics officer stood and bowed. How many complete sets of Anbu gear do you have in reserve? Jingi asked. Anbu equipment was custom and costly. Full body armor, masks, weapons, tool pouches. The headquarters kept only a limited stock. We have 50 spare sets at present, sir, the logistics ninja replied. 50 sets were neither a huge number nor insignificant. It would do for now. Move those 50 sets to the main hall. I'll need them. Also, write an application in my name to the Hokage office requesting at least 200 additional sets. The logistics officer froze. 200 sets, at least? Jingi's expression didn't change. When the third Hokage received such a request, he'd have every reason to be concerned. The cost of 200 complete Anbu sets would be enormous, and the implications for Anbu expansion even more so. Chapter 143. The special operation has become a kicking meeting. Jingi didn't care if the third Hokage got a headache. He wanted 200 sets of gear, period. The number of Anbu was going to climb steadily, and he intended to push the whole thing into mass production. The old saying, when the boss opens his mouth, the subordinates run their legs off, fit perfectly. He made an application and forced the logistics department to file it with the Hokage's office. Soon the request landed on the third Hokage's desk. The third had only just returned from placating the Sarutobi clan. His seat was barely warm when he opened the document. He almost sputtered tea across the room. 200 sets? Not 20? Was there an extra zero somewhere? Nonsense. Where would Anbu get so many people? His first thought was that Anbu, or rather Jingi, was pulling his leg. A full set of Anbu gear wasn't cheap. 200 sets would make the finance and logistics departments choke. He called in the Hokage guard platoon, tossed the application at them, and told them to verify the request. The guard returned with a helpless look. Hokage-sama, they said. Anbu confirmed the application is not a mistake. Lord Hyuga Jingi is expanding Anbu and insists on 200 sets. He even told us to send the gear immediately, or he'll have to take people to logistics to fetch it himself. The third Hokage fell silent. That kid was a walking disaster. He'd just calmed down the Shimura clan, and now Jingi was up to another stunt, demanding 200 sets of equipment as if logistics were a personal armory. He set the application aside. No way would he approve that. That was the end of it, or so he thought. There was no reply to the application, and Jingi knew the Hokage would refuse. Early the next morning, most of Konoha still slept. Only a few buildings showed light. The Anbu headquarters, however, was brightly lit. Every Anbu who'd been summoned filled the great hall, over 100 figures in the familiar animal masks. Heads were a dense, mottled pattern from the balcony where Jingi would appear. Jingi came out of the corridor into the hall, Nara Shikaku at his side, and climbed the dais. He looked down at the sea of masks, cleared his throat, and spoke clearly. I'm Hyuga Jingi, Anbu Deputy Director. Some of you may not know me. Tonight, Anbu will carry out a fairly large operation. I need everyone to be mentally prepared. Tiger, he called. Sir, replied a voice. A man in a tiger captain's mask stepped forward. Jingi handed him a list. Bring out everyone on this list. Starting now, they will no longer be members of Anbu. Silence, then a ripple of shock. Many pupils narrowed under the masks. They'd been told it was a special operation. This was not what anyone expected. Tiger hesitated for a second, puzzled by the timing, but an order was an order. He began calling names and pulling people forward. One by one, they came out. When the count finished, jaws dropped. More than 10 were on the list. Anbu was never that large. Expelling over 10 people at once was like losing a tenth of the force present. Deputy Director, by what right do you dismiss us? A few of those singled out demanded angrily. Joining Anbu had been nearly impossible. Being in it was a badge of honor for a shinobi. To be forced out was humiliation. Jingi leaned against the table on the dais, smiling without warmth, and looked down. To put it politely, this is a dismissal, a chance for clemency. To put it plainly, you have violated Anbu regulations. You are traitors. The hall erupted. People shouted, protested, called him mad. Tiger let out a low growl and nodded to quiet them, and the room stilled enough for Jingi to continue. Why do I call them traitors? I won't go into every detail, but since I took this post, these people habitually run to the Hokage's office. Anbu is no longer responsible for the Hokage's personal security. The Hokage guard platoon is. So why do you keep going to the Hokage's office for no reason? He let his words hang. Faces under masks reddened. Some lowered their eyes. Anbu headquarters is close to the Hokage's office. Too close, Jingi said. If you're leaking information, could you at least be a little smarter about it? I shouldn't be the one to discover it. Under the updated Anbu regulations, what they'd been doing counted as betraying Anbu. These men and women had, subtly and not so subtly, passed Anbu intelligence to the Hokage's office. Anbu has long been a direct unit under the Hokage, Jingi continued. It's been less than a year since we were set up as an independent department. I can understand some of you clinging to the old ways, but I won't make this harder than it needs to be. Take off your equipment, leave your weapons, and leave on your own. You're no longer Anbu. I will personally destroy your files, so there will be no stain left on your records. Faced with that, those on the list had no choice. One after another, they sullenly removed their gear and handed over their weapons as ordered. They left their armor and weapons behind and walked out with their heads bowed. Jingi's voice was hard as iron. This is the first time. I hope it's the last. If anyone repeats this, it won't be as simple as leaving the Anbu. The Anbu will not collapse just because a few people walk away. He opened a sealing scroll. Dozens of puppets poured out and immediately set about putting on the discarded equipment. When they stepped up from the scroll, their eyes glowed a cold green. Seeing them and hearing the rumors that had been circulating, everyone realized what it meant. These newcomers were Jingi's puppets. Each puppet donned armor and stood in ordered ranks beneath the podium, their green eyes sweeping the Anbu operatives like living instruments. The stern look left Jingi's face, and he smiled, but his words were sharp. Frankly, I don't care how many of you the Anbu keeps. What I hate is betrayal. If you can't accept that, leave, on your own. I won't force you to stay, and I won't deliberately ruin your records. He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. But if you stay, you will follow orders. Be obedient. Disobey me, and my puppets will take your place. He let the implication settle in. There are advantages to replacing you with puppets. For one, these puppets are only loyal to me. They can serve as communication tools at any time. No matter where they are in the ninja world, they can feed back what they see to me, and they can speak for me. And they're cheap, so cheap you could buy one for the price of a few exploding tags. Tell me, are such puppets hard to use? Silence answered him. Faces that had never imagined being replaced stiffened. The cost of the puppets made it worse. Cheap replacements for elite operatives, ridiculous, humiliating. Jingi had done more than keep the Anbu's numbers steady. By sending people out and filling their positions with puppets, the total strength hadn't dropped at all. He had even increased it. More important, the remaining operatives now knew they could be replaced at any time, and cheaply. Nara Shikaku watched, impressed. The plan had been elegant. Isolate and remove a few people via a special operation, then plug the gaps with puppets. It preserved the appearance of stability while creating a constant, demoralizing threat. There was another advantage Jingi had made plain. Puppets lack human weakness. A human Anbu operative might hesitate to carry out an order that crossed a moral line, even if the chain of command demanded it. A puppet would not. If Jingi commanded them to kill Shimura or anyone else, a puppet would not pause. Now, the special operation begins. Surround Shimura. Do not retreat without my order. No one may enter or leave. Yes, the dozen and more Anbu answered in unison, and the operation began. Jingi's puppets scattered to post around the headquarters as well. Motionless and statuesque without orders, they stood in corners with their eyes dimmed, appearing lifeless, until any unusual movement triggered them into lethal motion. I'm too old for this excitement, Shikaku muttered, rising. I'm going back to rest. He wasn't really exhausted. He wanted to avoid being pulled in as a scapegoat if the third Hokage came himself. Best to leave early. Go on, senior. Rest, Jingi said with a small smile. He even reminded Shikaku to recruit new people for the Anbu. Puppets could cover the operations division, Jingi warned, but clerical work and other duties still required real people. After seeing Shikaku depart, Jingi set about making contact with Orochimaru. In a hidden underground laboratory in Konoha, Orochimaru had been extracting special chakra from discarded puppet bodies. Dozens of puppet corpses lay in piles, scrapped husks from past experiments. One of the puppets on a research table flickered. The green light in its eyes wavered like a dying flame. Orochimaru looked up, the corners of his mouth pulling into a slight smile. Jingi-kun, he said quietly as Jingi entered. Have you changed your mind? How many corpses do you have left? Jingi cut to the point. He hadn't intended to reuse those old models, but seeing how effective the puppets were, he had been tempted. Orochimaru answered with a grin. Hundreds. If that's not enough, I can go to the Land of Rivers camp. They'll have more. Do as before, Jingi said. Help me build puppets. You cover the costs, and I'll give you a share of the finished pieces. First, produce everything you can from the materials on hand and help me deal with the demigod's corpse. I have some special materials ready. I think you'll be interested in that corpse. Of course, Orochimaru purred. A demigod's corpse promised a wealth of secrets. It sounded irresistible. We'll study it and turn it into a puppet. It will be powerful. Jingi hesitated only over one thing. He did not want to touch Hanzo's body. That task was better left to someone like Orochimaru, who relished such research. The poisonous salamander fish's corpse, however, Jingi would handle himself. He didn't know why, but working with human corpses made him uncomfortable. Animal remains did not. Happy cooperation, then, Orochimaru said. Within 10 days, I'll send the puppets to the Anbu. With business settled, Orochimaru tossed aside a puppet and unrolled a sealing scroll. He looked over the scrapped bodies again, considering them. Puppet materials were scarce and expensive. If something could be recycled, why not? He decided to reuse what he could. The recycled puppets would still be strong enough, and they could always self-destruct if necessary. Chapter 145. The Third Hokage. Damn! This time I hit a wall. Orochimaru had begun to line everything up. In fact, he'd already gathered all the materials he needed, waiting only for Hyuga Jingi's nod. The moment Jingi gave the go-ahead, he could have the puppets ready in record time. While Orochimaru prepared, the Anbu Operations Department moved into action. Dozens of masked operatives surged toward the Shimura clan estate. Under the command of squad leaders Tiger and Hawk, they fanned out and completely surrounded the compound. What's going on? The Anbu, again? And so many of them. The Shimura clan's on-duty shinobi were nearly frozen with fear when they saw the encirclement. They scrambled back into the compound and raced straight for the clan chief's courtyard. Chief, something's wrong. The Anbu are here again, someone shouted. The chief had been asleep, but the shouted alarm kicked him awake. He tumbled out in his pajamas, still half dazed. What did you say? The Anbu are back? How many? One, many. I don't know the exact number, but there are a lot of them, the on-duty man replied tensely. The chief's face hardened. Hyuga Jingyi, he barked. After a stunned moment, the Shimura chief let out a furious roar. He didn't need to guess who was behind this. Earlier, the Anbu had attempted arrests during the day and been blocked by the third Hokage, but now they were back at night, and with overwhelming force. They were clearly making a statement. At the same time, Hiruzen Sarutobi stood by the window of the Hokage office, eyes fixed toward the Shimura compound. He had received intelligence that the Anbu planned a major operation, so instead of going home, he had remained at the office, waiting. The wait paid off. The Anbu had mobilized in force and were closing in on the Shimura land, surrounding it from all sides as if daring anyone to interfere. Hiruzen let out a low snort. Looking at the deployment, he knew this would not be resolved easily. Jingi was prickly. Poke him, and he would retaliate. The Shimura clan had stuck their necks out, and now they were being targeted. If the Anbu pressed their attack on the Shimura clan, Hiruzen understood he would have to step in to protect them. If he failed to do so, the damage would not only be to one clan's face, but to his own credibility as Hokage. The Hyuga precedent had already sown doubt. If he didn't shield allies who helped the village, who would trust him in the future? They could simply switch their loyalty elsewhere. Besides, the Shimura were his loyal retainers. If he couldn't defend them, the blow to his authority would be severe. He moved out at once. Fortunately, the Shimura estate wasn't far from the Hokage office, and he reached the scene quickly. The Anbu had not yet executed whatever next step they were preparing, but the compound was ringed, and the clan's defenders were locked in a tense standoff. Shimura family members kept asking the Anbu what they intended, but the operatives remained silent. When Hiruzen arrived, the Anbu, seeing the Hokage, formally lowered their weapons and bowed. Hiruzen's expression was dark as he pushed through to the innermost ring and confronted Tiger and Hawk. "What are you trying to do?" he demanded. "Who authorized surrounding the Shimura clan?" Faced with the Hokage's roar, every Anbu operative looked down and held their silence. Hiruzen saw it. These men were not the architects of this move, but the ones carrying out orders. He could not take his wrath out on them. "All right," he growled, reining in his anger. "Break ranks. Retreat. Your mission's over." He expected obedience. After all, the Anbu had always answered to the Hokage. He thought they would withdraw like they had during the day. But nothing happened. The operatives stayed motionless, weapons at their sides. Putting away their arms and bowing had been the most respect they had shown him. They clearly weren't going to abandon their post lightly. "Do you not understand me?" Hiruzen snapped, anger flaring. "Am I not the Hokage? Obey my order." Tiger took a breath and straightened. "We obey you, Hokage-sama, but—" "Then speak. Give me a reason I can accept, and I won't blame you," Hiruzen said, glowering. Tiger looked between his men and the Hokage, then forced the words out. "The vice director said that if we withdraw without his order, it will count as a mission failure. If the mission fails, we'll be dismissed from the Anbu." Hiruzen froze. Dismissed? Many people were already kicked out of the Anbu before this operation began, Tiger said. No one wants to be next. No one wants to be the one blamed and driven out. Hiruzen felt a cold tightening in his chest. He hadn't been informed that mass dismissals had occurred. That was internal Anbu business he couldn't simply override. The realization stung. The Anbu's internal politics were now beyond his control. And the director doesn't care if he has operatives left? Hiruzen snapped. Hawk, who had been watching quietly, stepped forward. "Hokage-sama, the director used a batch of puppets. These puppets can replace our positions." It was like a slap to Hiruzen's face. Puppets replacing Anbu operatives. If he'd heard it before, he would have laughed at the absurdity. The Anbu were the village's elite, covert operatives, bodyguards, assassins. No automaton could replicate their judgment, adaptability, or loyalty. And yet someone had deployed mechanized replacements. The third Hokage's brow creased into a trench of worry. Jingi's puppets, the thought of those constructs, obedient and expendable, sent a chill through him. No wonder the Anbu wouldn't risk leaving. To step down would be to hand their roles to unfeeling machines, to be cast aside without recourse. This wasn't just an operational problem, it was a crisis for the village's institutions and Hiruzen's authority. If human operatives could be supplanted by puppets at a director's whim, the whole balance of power and trust in Konoha shifted, and at the center of it was Hyuga Jingi, pulling strings the third Hokage had not anticipated. Hiruzen stared at the encircled compound, at the rigid lines of Anbu beneath the moonlight, and felt, for the first time in a long while, the ground under him give way. Damn! He had hit a wall he hadn't seen coming. The Anbu agents were even more reluctant to provoke Jingi after he'd already shown his hand. He'd killed the chicken to warn the monkeys before making any further moves. When the time came to act, Tiger and Hawk both shook their heads. "Do you have orders to arrest?" Third Hokage asked. "No," they replied in unison. Their orders were only to surround the Shimura household and prevent anyone from entering or leaving. Arrests had not been authorized. They didn't know what would come next. Third Hokage let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Then have the Hokage guard platoon move forward and tell the Shimura clan not to panic. I'll handle this myself. The Anbu will not bother them further." It was a small concession to the embarrassed Anbu. Simply letting the Hoge guard shout across the cordon didn't violate the mission's parameters, and it gave the Anbu a face-saving way out. Third Hokage handed the situation to the guard platoon and left for the Anbu headquarters. He needed to find Hyuga Jingi and talk things over in person. The village was fighting the sand in the land of rivers. The front needed total focus, and the home front could not be allowed to fracture. Jingi's provocations could trigger trouble that the village could not afford. The third no longer cared about the pharmaceutical department's mess or the Anbu's privileges. Those could wait. Stability was everything. Jingi had not left the Anbu HQ. He was in the director's office going through documents that Deerheart had already filtered for him. Deerheart handled the small, routine matters, setting aside anything that required the director's signature or a personal decision. He would do the legwork, but he didn't want, and by regulation couldn't take on, Jingi's authority. Besides, Deerheart liked the idea of going home to his tiger of a wife at night. Being holed up at headquarters permanently wasn't attractive. As Third Hokage arrived, the puppets stationed at the gate lifted their heads. Their normally shuttered eyes opened, a green glow glaring out of the dimness. The emotionless faces locked onto him, and the Hokage's expression darkened. "I want to see Hyuga Jingi," he said. The puppets complied. Inside, Jingi had them part and admit the third to the director's office. Third Hokage snorted at the sight of the retreating puppets and glanced around the headquarters with increasing displeasure. Jingi's puppets stood at every choke point. He could control the entire building from his chair. Without Jingi's command, no one could enter or leave. Inside the office, Jingi waved Third Hokage to a chair Deerheart had thoughtfully pulled up. "Hokage-sama, please sit," Jingi said. Third Hokage sat, his face still grim. "Jingi, this Anbu commotion is too much. The village must be stable right now. We're at war. Internal disturbances are the last thing we need." "You want stability?" Jingi asked, sounding genuinely surprised. "But aren't you the one who started this?" Third Hokage's color fluctuated. "You held up the pharmaceutical department's materials today. You talk about revoking the Anbu's privileges tomorrow, openly and secretly trying to poach Anbu members. Any disturbance in the Anbu, and those people will come running to the Hokage's office to report. They react far more to Hokage-sama than to their director." Jingi spread his hands, leaning back. "I have no prejudice against the Shimura clan, but they have a lot of opinions about me. Besides, that old man from the Shimura family made things difficult for me at the meeting. I'm curious, when did Hyuga Jingi ever offend him?" Third Hokage bristled. "I will educate him. This won't happen again. Shimura, Sarutobi, and the families backing the two elder advisors will no longer cause trouble for you." Jingi's eyes gleamed. "Good. Then I'll make a conditions-based request, 500 full sets of Anbu equipment." Third Hokage almost choked. "Impossible. 500 sets is far too many. You know how costly a complete set is. We're at war with the sand. This village cannot afford 500. At most, 100. 400, Jingi countered casually. 100, the third shot back. 400, 150. They haggled like traitors. Between the third's unwillingness to divert too many resources and Jingi's stubborn leverage, He controlled the Anbu headquarters and could have caused far more disruption. The number finally settled, 260 full sets. All right, Jingi said, satisfied. 260 sets. Once the equipment is delivered, the Anbu will withdraw. Third Hokage nodded, relieved that at least for the moment the immediate crisis would be diffused. Chapter 147. The bottom line is here. Never give in again. Jingi had no intention of playing games with the third Hokage, and he refused to let the Anbu withdraw first. If they pulled back and he was left empty-handed, who would he complain to about a lack of equipment? So he put it bluntly. Once the equipment arrived and was handed over, the Anbu would withdraw. That was his bottom line, non-negotiable. Could the logistics department muster more than 200 sets of gear? Certainly. Konoha had the resources. The problem was that the third Hokage was reluctant to give them to Jingi. If the Anbu hadn't made such a scene, Hiruzen would have never considered handing over that batch. He'd wanted the Anbu to withdraw first. This time, Jingi absolutely refused. That won't do, Jingi had said. If the Anbu withdraw and I don't get the equipment, who do I go to next? Are you saying you want the Anbu to do this again? Someone asked. Do what again? The entire Anbu Operations Division had been deployed to surround the Shimura clan's lands, terrifying the clan half to death. If the Anbu did that repeatedly, how could anyone live? The Shimura wouldn't dare attack the Anbu directly, but they would certainly storm the Hokage's office to make a scene. After all, the Shimura were loyal retainers of the village. If they suffered injustice and didn't go to the Hokage, where else could they seek redress? I'll have people gather the equipment as quickly as possible, Hiruzen told him, then left with a dark expression. At that moment, he didn't want another argument. He only wanted the gear gathered, the Anbu withdrawn, and the village returned to peace. If the Anbu kept surrounding the Shimura estate, rumors would spread like wildfire. Look at the Uchiha. Just having the Anbu monitor them had been enough to set tongues wagging. But the Shimura weren't just being watched. They were being besieged. Clan members couldn't come or go. Supplies were cut off. If that continued more than a few days, the Shimura would be in chaos. Would they attack the Anbu? Jingi only scoffed at the notion. Attacking Anbu would be a grave crime, and if the Shimura struck first, the blame would be theirs. Back at the Hokage's office, Hiruzen immediately sent for Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado. Hiruzen, I heard something bad happened with the Shimura? The two asked as soon as they entered. Hiruzen, irritated, took a long drag from his pipe. As you've heard, the Shimura stood up and were targeted by the Anbu. Their land is surrounded. No one can get in or out. How dare he? Koharu and Homura muttered, eyes flashing. Simply ordering the Anbu to surround a major clan. Was there no law anymore? He did dare, Hiruzen said, and his chest tightened with anger. The Hokage finding himself unable to order the Anbu to withdraw. Unthinkable. At any other time, the Anbu would follow his command. But with Jingi's absolute control, they wouldn't risk disobeying him. So what do we do? Homura asked, recovering first. Hiruzen met his gaze inside. I spoke with Jingi. The logistics department is to prepare 260 sets of equipment and turn them over. Then the Anbu will withdraw. That's impossible, Homura yelped, stunned. Hiruzen, are you out of your mind? Do you know how valuable Anbu equipment is? 260 sets. What are you thinking? Even if the Anbu expanded, they wouldn't need that many. As logistics chief, Homura knew the cost all too well. The equipment each Anu member wore was expensive and comprehensive. Hiruzen only puffed on his pipe, keeping his cool. The Anbu increased by dozens overnight. Impossible, Koharu said aloud. To join the Anbu, you need to pass layer upon layer of selection. Maybe 10 get in per intake, dozens overnight, and there's been no recent selection. Where did they come from? Hiruzen's eyes swept over his two old comrades, tired. They didn't come from anywhere conventional. The new personnel are all Hyuga Jingi's puppets. He intends to use a batch of puppets to replace the action division, puppets with absolute loyalty, who don't fear death, and who can be eyes for monitoring and communication. Advantages the Anbu simply don't have. Puppets deployed in this way meant Jingi held the initiative at all times. The functionality of those puppets was terrifying. Their presence at once brought good news and bad. The good news, the puppets were controlled by the village. They could function as a special force, and their production wasn't prohibitively expensive. The bad news, the F4 couldn't obtain these puppets. Hiruzen exhaled. The village needs stability. Koharu, Homura, I hope you understand. The logistics department must send the equipment quickly so the Shimura can be relieved. If the Anbu keep surrounding the Shimura's land for too long, it will deal a fatal blow to our credibility and authority. Homura and Koharu fell silent. 260 sets of Anbu gear was not a small ask. The logistics department produced them, but it would be like cutting off their own flesh. Homura's face showed immediate pain. Koharu's expression was no less grim. Hiruzen had made his choice. Stability for the village during the war had to come first. They could not move against the Anbu now, and if the Anbu's privileges were unchallenged, all their previous efforts would be undermined. Chapter 148. People can fail, but puppets can't. Moreover, the pharmaceutical department had been excluded, leaving the village's medical system in an awkward position. Homura Mitokado could only accept the third Hokage's decision. Once the Hokage had made up his mind, there was little point in arguing. I understand. I'll arrange for people to prepare the equipment and send it to the Anbu as soon as possible, Homura said. With terms agreed, resistance was pointless. The F4 might be unified, but the third Hokage was their leader. When he decided on something, the others, however reluctant, had to accept it. Everything they held had been given by the third Hokage, though they had also provided him with considerable support. Once the three of them reached a consensus, and with Danzo Shimura still imprisoned, the logistics department moved fast. Jingi had thought gathering all the equipment would take several days. He had underestimated the village's reserves. By noon the next day, every piece of equipment had been delivered to the Anbu, nothing missing. With the items delivered, Jingi had no reason to keep the Anbu surrounding Shimura, so he withdrew the forces. The effort had not been wasted. More than 300 new members effectively joined the Anbu, not as humans, but as puppets, transforming the organization's structure overnight. Fortunately for the official roster, Jingi's puppets weren't counted as Anbu personnel, but with over 300 puppets integrated, entire guard units in some areas were handed over to them. Bases were guarded by puppets. The pharmaceutical headquarters' security was handled by puppets, and even the team assigned to secretly protect Kushina was replaced by puppets. Humans can make mistakes. Puppets do not. Jingi would not allow enemies to infiltrate Konoha and kidnap Kushina. With the pharmaceutical base and headquarters guarded by puppets, and Kushina's protection entrusted to them, the Anbu found themselves in an awkward position. Much of their work had been taken over. Some missions that normally required Anbu operatives were now being executed by puppets, and discontent began to spread. Hawk and Tiger, speaking for others, went straight to Jingi. They had to act. The way things were going, puppets would replace all Anbu functions, and the human operatives would be left idle and effectively unemployed. No Anbu could accept that. It would be one thing if only field operatives were affected, but even clerical and administrative tasks were being gradually shifted. People were anxious. Jingi understood their concerns, so he was frank. Puppets have advantages, but they can never truly replace humans. Many tasks still rely on you, and some complex missions require human execution. The Anbu's personnel adjustments are complicated and not finalized yet. You two should tell the others not to be anxious. You will not be replaced, you will not lose your jobs, and you will remain in the Anbu. He was still figuring out how to reassign the remaining human Anbu after so many duties had been taken over. He would not abandon them. The arrangements just needed to be made gradually. Senior, where do you think these people should be placed? Hawk asked. How would this old man know? Nara Shikaku protested, sounding exasperated. In the past, the Anbu were always short-staffed. We needed small squads everywhere. Only you, kid, could cause the Anbu to suddenly have a surplus. As he spoke, Shikaku looked as if he had seen a ghost. Anbu shortages had been a perennial problem in Konoha and other villages. Screening standards were strict, and the demand for covert guards and special missions was high. That scarcity had never allowed for many idle Anbu. Jingi's sudden influx of puppets had exploded the numbers, leaving many Anbu operatives idle and afraid for their jobs. The situation was a wake-up call. Despite his complaints, Shikaku tried to help find placements. Do we send a batch to the front lines? Tsunade already has at least 3 squads assigned to her, and several other squads are gathering enemy intelligence on the battlefield, Jinji replied. What about Konoha Prison? There are enough people there too. Hokage office? They don't need Anbu there anymore. The new Hokage guard platoon handles protection. They needed operatives nowhere he could think of. Shikaku, defeated, lowered his head over his paperwork and decided Jingi could sort it out himself. There were no pressing emergencies in the Anbu. He shrugged, skipped the rest of his work, and went home. Jingi kept turning the problem over in his head. No placement felt right. He couldn't realistically make Anbu members into laborers. If that were the plan, they might as well disband. The thought nagged at him until he went home to clear his head. At the entrance, his shoes were neatly lined up. He stepped inside and heard a cheerful voice. Jingi, you're back! Kushina dashed out and hugged his arm, not letting go. Mikoto ni came to visit, and she brought a guest. Where are Nawaki and Minato? Jingi asked, rubbing Kushina's bright hair as he exchanged shoes. They were taken out by Nawaki. I don't know where they went. He didn't bring me. Kushina bounced along beside him, ever the stubborn one. She loved to spar with Nawaki and usually left him flustered and speechless. Nawaki could never win those arguments and avoided taking her along when he went out, his only small act of revenge. If they won't take you, then don't take them when you go out to play, Jingi said, amused. Children were children. Uchiha Makoto and Uchiha Fugaku rose from the living room sofa to greet him. At the last high-level meeting, Jingi's casual greeting had irritated the third Hokage and the others. The Uchiha had spent time trying to divine Jingi's intent. Was he provoking the Hokage faction or trying to win the Uchiha over? If it was provocation, the Uchiha preferred to stay clear of the Hokage faction's internal struggles. How the Hokage faction fought was their own business. The Uchiha did not want to be dragged into it unless Tsunade's faction offered them support. After several days of discussion, the Uchiha decided to test the waters first. The scene played out with Uchiha Fugaku arriving at Jingi's house, accompanied by Uchiha Makoto. Fugaku couldn't come alone and had to bring Makoto as a kind of buffer. No need for formalities, Jingi said, waving them in. Make yourselves at home. He smiled, glanced at the teacups on the table, then went to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of juice. Back in the living room, he took a sip and settled onto the sofa. He gave Kushina a meaningful look. Kushina understood. Take Makoto upstairs and keep them out of the way. She stood, took Makoto's hand, and led her away, leaving Jingi alone with Fugaku. Once they were out of earshot, Fugaku bowed slightly. Lord, I apologize for the sudden visit. It's all right. Jingi's tone was casual. He held no personal grudge against the Uchiha, provided they behaved. He set the juice aside in a comfortable posture and asked bluntly, So, are you here as guests or? Fugaku hesitated, then spoke plainly. Lord, may I ask your opinion on the Uchiha's situation in the village? Jingi blinked. The Uchiha's situation? That's been an issue since the village was founded. Madara's defection made things worse, and the Hokage faction has its prejudices. You know that. If you have a point, say it. Fugaku's face tightened. He'd come to petition, not to rehearse history. My father's health is failing. His old wounds have left him unable to manage the clan as he used to. I've taken over family affairs, and I want the Uchiha to integrate with the village instead of remaining a separate, isolated body. The Hokage faction holds a serious prejudice against the Uchiha, Fugaku continued. I need your help. Only you and Tsunade can change how the Uchiha are treated. Jingi listened, expression neutral. And what does helping you do for us? Fugaku bowed his head, thinking. The Uchiha have resources, funds, supplies. We can provide them if you cooperate with us. In manpower, too, Uchiha shinobi could be made available to serve your orders. Jingi exhaled and shook his head. Let's stop there. Tsunade and I don't lack money or materials. As for Uchiha personnel, if Tsunade and I ordered the Uchiha to do something, could you refuse? The question landed hard. Fugaku's eyes flicked up, startled. Jingi leaned forward. Alliances with people like Ino Shikacho make sense. They're useful allies. But the Uchiha are different. Getting involved with you now would invite trouble, not benefits. You'd be asking us to assume your risks for no real gain. Lord, Fugaku began, urgent. Jingi cut him off. There's an external war to worry about. The village needs internal stability. The Uchiha carry too much baggage. Your clan's history, the suspicion that follows you. Accepting you openly would create friction. And honestly, I don't see the sincerity. Fugaku stood, hands clenched. We're sincere. We want to change. Change requires more than words, Jingi interrupted. After the nine-tailed attack, some of your people practically begged to prove their loyalty to the F4, and even then they weren't trusted. Now you come offering money and supplies as if that's supposed to be persuasive. You don't understand how hollow that looks. Jingi's voice didn't rise, but it was cold. We don't need your funds. We won't be buying loyalty or visibility with clan coffers. And we're not here to command another clan like an army you can mobilize on a whim. If you want a place in the village, show consistent goodwill over time. Right now, the risk of taking you on outweighs any possible benefit. He thought of the larger picture. Konoha was at war with the sand. Danzo Shimura, the old schemer, was incarcerated. For the moment, the F4 had no appetite to increase internal conflict. They would likely hold the line rather than push the Uchiha into a corner, at least for now. Fugaku's face fell. But Lord, if we cooperate, if we truly give, Jingi raised a hand, please leave. There was finality in it. You're not under direct attack right now. You can take your time to show real change. Don't expect a quick fix or special treatment. Fugaku bowed once more, some desperation in his posture, then turned and followed Makoto's footsteps up the stairs. He did not push the issue further. On the second-floor landing, hidden in the shadows of the stairwell, Kushina had stopped with Uchiha Makoto. They'd both heard the entire conversation. Kushina glanced at Makoto, concern in her eyes. Makoto-ni, is the Uchiha situation really that bad? She asked quietly. Makoto's expression was unreadable as they descended, but the answer lay in the strained silence that followed them back into the house. The question of the Uchiha's place in the village had been thrown into the open, answered for now with a refusal, and the real work, if there was to be any, would have to be done in patient, measured steps rather than sudden pledges. Chapter 150. Why double it? Because I want to. That's a bit awkward. Makoto's smile was strained. She didn't know how the family had arranged things. Talented and respected in the village, she was still young and had little standing in Uchiha affairs. There was no way she could interfere in the family's major decisions. Kushina, what are we having for dinner? Jingi called up toward the stairs after seeing off Fugaku, who had left looking somewhat uncomfortable. Huh? I want beef. Kushina answered on autopilot, then froze. She'd almost given herself away. Eavesdropping wasn't the worst. Being caught was. Her cheeks flushed and she gave Jingi a sheepish grin. Jingi returned a reassuring look. It wasn't shameful as long as it stayed unsaid. If Fugaku had any opinions about it, Jingi hoped he'd keep them to himself. Seeing Jingi beckon, Kushina obediently came down the stairs with Makoto following awkwardly behind. Once they were all in the living room, Jingi grew serious. What I told Fugaku today. Don't tell anyone outside about it, understand? Of course I won't, Kushina said earnestly, blinking big eyes. Makoto nodded quickly. Jingi, don't worry. I won't say a word. All right, go play. I'll call you when dinner's ready. Jingi shrugged off his jacket and tossed it on the sofa, then headed into the kitchen. He'd rather figure out something delicious than worry about the Uchiha family's messy affairs. The smell of cooking soon drew Nawaki back into the house. I'm home, Nawaki called as soon as he walked in, as if he wanted the whole neighborhood to know. Jingi glanced toward the door. Where's Minato? He went to eat ramen. He absolutely loves Ichiraku ramen. I swear I'm getting sick of it. At the mention of Ichiraku, Nawaki's face changed. Lately, Jingi had been busier and home less, so when there was no cooking at home, Nawaki and that blonde kid kept eating out together. The blonde kid loved Ichiraku and could eat it 3 times a day. Nawaki couldn't. After a few meals, he was practically repulsed by the smell of ramen. Jingi raised an eyebrow. So when there's no cooking at home, you just keep eating ramen? Exactly, Nawaki groaned. Kushina chimed in, giggling. I didn't eat ramen. Mikoto-ni brings me lunch every day. Kushina was pickier and had money, so her meals were fine. Nawaki, on the other hand, couldn't hold on to money and just followed along. After several days of ramen, He was nearly ramen-brained. Ichiraku was tasty, but not 3 meals a day. How Minato managed it was beyond him. Apparently Naruto was the same, never tired of ramen and thinking a big meal meant going out for a bowl. Nawaki couldn't last that long. All right, stop looking so miserable. If you don't want ramen, cook for yourselves. I can't promise I'll be home to cook every night, Jingi said. There were 2 ways to avoid hardship. Do it yourself, or have someone like Kushina who could cook well, or have enough money to eat out. Kushina and Nawaki, for all their sibling bickering, rarely went together. Kushina wouldn't take Nawaki out to eat, and Nawaki didn't take her to play. Whoever would give in first was anyone's guess. Nawaki liked mischief and roaming around with Minato more than playing with Kushina. Kushina's thinking was simple. If you don't take me out to play, I won't take you out to eat unless you apologize. Still, if Nawaki genuinely had no food, Kushina wouldn't let him starve. Jingi, I'll head back now. Mikoto stood and bowed. Stay. Since you're already here, don't leave right away. Jingi waved her off. Have dinner with us. Mikoto ni, let's go wash our hands. Kushina grabbed Mikoto's sleeve and dragged her off toward the wash basin. Nawaki shrugged at Jingi with a helpless expression. Jingi was slightly surprised that Nawaki could act so casually around Mikoto now. He used to be so shy. Maybe he'd given up pining and started treating her like a classmate. That made it easier to interact normally. Stop messing around, wash your hands, and get ready to eat. Soon everyone gathered at the dining table. Nawaki, gripping his chopsticks like a prizefighter, shouted, I'm going to dig in. He attacked the food with the appetite of someone starved, heedless of his manners, which made Kushina glare and Mikoto laugh. Jingi could only shake his head. After too many bowls of ramen, the kid was clearly famished. Leave some for us. Kushina objected as she watched her favorite dishes disappear and dove into the scramble. Only Jingi and Mikoto stayed calm. Jingi, have you been really busy with work lately? Mikoto asked, breaking the clatter. He hadn't expected her to start a conversation, but he smiled and nodded. It's been manageable. Most things are under control, so I should have more free time for a while. He didn't mention the many Anbu matters. Fortunately, Narashikaku had helped take a lot off his plate. As a leader, he only needed to delegate. He didn't have to do everything himself. With the Hokage's office putting less pressure on him, he could afford to relax. Then you can stay home more often? Kushina asked, catching the point immediately. Nawaki, still grabbing for food, looked up with wide, shining eyes. Jingi looked at him and made a decision. Starting tomorrow, your training doubles. I'll have someone supervise you. If you don't finish it, no food. He rapped Nawaki lightly with the edge of his chopstick. Why? Nawaki protested plaintively. I didn't do anything wrong. Jingi bared his teeth in a grin. Because I want to double it for you. Nawaki went quiet, utterly dumbfounded. Chapter 151, Uchiha Mikoto, Who Else But Me? Pfft. Kushina burst out laughing. Uchiha Mikoto couldn't help laughing either. Nawaki laughed along too, though a bit sardonic in his amusement. You always pick on me. Boo-hoo, sis. When are you coming back? He quickly brushed the thought away. The idea of his sister returning only made him wince. It was better if she stayed on the front lines a while longer. Jingi teased him sometimes, but at least Jingi didn't hover over him all day. Tsunade was a different story. Nawaki could be beaten at any moment if she took a mind to it. Resigned, he rolled his eyes, fell silent, and obediently lowered his head to eat. After dinner, darkness settled. Uchiha Mikoto hesitated in the doorway, clearly torn about whether to go home. Jingi noticed and stood up without being asked. Come on, I'll walk you back. It's a good chance to digest, he offered. Thank you, senior. Rogomar, Mikoto said, bowing politely. I want to go too. Kushina complained, peering at the sink full of bowls. It was her turn to wash dishes tonight, so she couldn't join them even if she wanted to. They left the house and walked toward the Uchiha compound. Jingi glanced at Mikoto, who kept her head down most of the way, thought for a moment, and said gently, Mikoto, you're Kushina's good friend. If you already consider her like a sister, don't let the clan pressure you. Senior. Mikoto looked up and gave a small, forced smile. The clan had been dropping hints. Visit the Uchiha house more, spend more time with Kushina, deepen your bond, ideally so the two families would become kin. When Mikoto realized what they meant, She wished the ground would swallow her. The clan's insinuations were mortifying. The people in your clan said some embarrassing things to you, didn't they? Jingi asked bluntly, since the little girl was too shy to bring it up herself. Makoto's face turned apple red. She was mortified, and Jingi couldn't suppress a chuckle. Children of that age secretly longed for romance, but the idea of being used as a bargaining chip was another story. She was sensible enough to understand, and yet it was still hard to accept. Openly defying the clan wasn't an option. Don't overthink it. Just be yourself. If you want to, you can come visit anytime. You can play with Kushina whenever you like. Really? Makoto's eyes widened with surprise. For her, such freedom felt almost unreal. The thought of interacting with any ulterior motive made her uncomfortable. She didn't want to squander her friendship with Kushina. Of course, Jingi said with a smile. And you're not the only one in this bind. Eh? Makoto's mind immediately jumped to the Hyuga me in particular. Could the Hyuga also be using their own children this way? She pictured her quiet, withdrawn friend and gasped. Jingi reached out and patted her head twice. You're still young. You shouldn't be dragged into the clan's politics. If anyone comes to bother you about it, just say my name. Don't be embarrassed. If you're being put in this position, it's partly because of me. Strengthening ties, forming alliances. The same rules applied here as in other countries. Marriage was an especially reliable way to seal alliances in the ninja world. That was why the Uchiha had subtly suggested Makoto spend more time at Jingi's home. Her closeness to Kushina gave her more chances to meet. Compared to ordinary people, she had more opportunity, and the clan wanted to make the most of it. When they reached the Uchiha compound, Jingi noticed many people peering from the shadows. He didn't linger. He walked Makoto to the gate, bowed, and turned to leave. Senior. Jingi hadn't gone far when Makoto caught up to him, out of breath. Do you need something else? He asked. She took 2 shaky breaths. Senior, isn't me from the main house? How could they? The main branch of the Hyuga was supposed to be sacrosanct. Using a main branch child as a pawn felt unthinkable, because the Hyuga's situation right now is even worse than the Uchiha's. Go home, Jingi said briefly, then waved and vanished. Worse than the Uchiha? The Uchiha had been targeted by the F4. That was bad enough. But the Hyuga had managed to enrage almost the entire Hokage faction and were broadly unpopular on both sides. Jingi and Tsunade hadn't even been actively attacking them, yet covert measures were already underway. Jobs and positions tied to the Hyuga were being affected, like the way Inoshika Cho had been targeted for siding with Tsunade. The Hyuga's luck had been terrible since the last summit. Hyuga Hiyashi had tried to contact Jingi but kept finding him at the Anbu base. Meanwhile, Hyuga Mi's visits to Kushina's household had increased. It was obvious what the clan was planning, and Jingi felt nothing but contempt. Send 2 little girls to cozy up to me? If you dare, send a couple of grown, attractive women instead. He was disgusted at their lack of shame. At the Land of Rivers camp, the fighting remained intense. A rough balance had formed between the 2 villages, with steady skirmishes and attrition. The Land of Rivers front was much larger than the Land of Rain one. In a medical tent, a bleary-eyed Tsunade unsealed a scroll that had arrived from the village. Since reaching the front, she had been busier than ever, deciphering poisons, making antidotes, brewing medicines, treating the wounded, going into the field for rescues, and carrying out missions. Wherever there was a need, Tsunade's shadow appeared. What does the 3rd Hokage want this time? She muttered, tearing the seal. Her face changed as she read. Even used to messages framing matters in a certain way, she was stunned. She choked on her own breath and let out a shocked laugh-cough. She rubbed her eyes, certain she must be sleep-deprived. But the words on the scroll didn't shift. Whatever the 3rd Hokage had written, it was serious enough to leave Tsunade dumbfounded. Chapter 152, Every Failure is a Lesson. Tsunade rubbed her eyes vigorously, slapped her cheeks to wake herself, and kept reading. Shocked, confused, trying not to laugh and wanting to cry at the same time. Her expression shifted rapidly. Jingi had really stirred up trouble. He'd even forced the 3rd Hokage into pleading. The sealing scroll was little more than a bitter complaint. The 3rd Hokage cataloged Jingi's supposed crimes: flouting rules, nursing grudges, relentlessly pursuing the Shimura clan, inexplicably dismissing Anbu members and issuing what amounted to death orders that left even the Anbu unwilling to obey. Worst of all, Jingi refused to turn over his puppets and instead used them extensively himself, replacing Anbu personnel with machines, leaving many operatives idle and disrupting the village's plans. Between the lines, the Hokage kept trying to tug at Tsunade's heart. The village needed those puppets. He still wouldn't give up. At first, Tsunade felt some sympathy, but by the end of the scroll, she tossed it aside. It was the same old tactic: appeal to the village's loyalty and hope she would soften and persuade Jingi to hand them over. Not a word about fair compensation. They simply wanted the puppets. Tsunade knew Jingi wouldn't surrender them. If things had been handled from the start and the village had paid a price, Jingi might have sold some puppets. Once the village tasted the advantage, they'd want more, and Jingi would still be the one profiting while amassing his own stock. Now they expected them handed over for nothing. Who could accept that? Not Jingi and not Tsunade. Persuade him? Forget it. Whoever had the ability could try, but Granny certainly would not. The so-called F4 wanted to freeload Jingi's creations like they freeloaded Tsunade's medicines. She did the research, they did the production, and she only drew a salary at the Konoha hospital. No dividends, no rewards for her research. Once was enough of that abuse. For the village's sake, Tsunade had tried to ignore it, but the third Hokage and his cronies were back asking for the same freeloading again, and she would not permit it, even if the puppets were genuinely vital to Konoha's war effort. In truth, if the Hokage and his council had cooperated early, paid for and increased the puppet forces, deployed them in the field, Konoha's casualties could have been far lower. They might even have taught the Sand Village a harsh lesson or ended the war sooner. Imagine a unit of unhesitating puppets storming enemy lines, fighting without fear, willing to self-destruct if necessary. The sight alone would terrify any opponent. You wouldn't need tens of thousands. 1,000 well-deployed puppets could have broken the Sand Force's resolve. But some people were always greedy, always looking for freebies, always ready to demand everyone else sacrifice for the village while protecting their own families and privileges. Their schemes crashed headlong into Jingi's stubbornness. And then, there was nothing else to say. She picked up the casualty report next and read. Her frustration softened into a resigned sigh. If they weren't willing to pay or compromise, let them drag it out. After the First Shinobi World War, Konoha had recovered too quickly and grown too confident, giving the old guard the courage to press their demands. The village is strong, Tsunade murmured to herself, but the Sand Village isn't weak either. Those words went unheard by the third Hokage, and remembering Jingi's blunt assessment of the Sand Village left Tsunade no appetite to dwell further. On the other side of the front, in the Sand Village's camp, Chiyo was running everything, big and small. Late at night in the command center, she sat staring at a photograph on the table, a young couple with a small child cradled in the woman's arms. For a long time, Chiyo couldn't tear her eyes away, her cloudy gaze filled with tears. The couple were her son and daughter-in-law, Sasori of the Red Sand's parents, fallen in the land of fire at the hands of Konoha's White Fang, Sakumo Hatake. Their bodies had never been recovered. Lady Chiyo. The informant's voice jolted her back. She quickly put the photo away and wiped her eyes, the sorrow sealed under her usual cold demeanor. Come in. The messenger laid a stack of intelligence sealing scrolls on the table. Lady Chiyo, these came from Lord Ibizo. He says Konoha's vigilance is very high. He asked whether we want to send more operatives into the Land of Fire to gather intelligence. Chiyo and her brother were the third Kazekage's right and left hands, the former responsible for war, the latter for intelligence. The third Kazekage himself, famed as the strongest Kazekage, rarely left the village. Only if disaster struck or the war turned badly would he personally go to the front. Like the third Hokage in Konoha, he stayed put. Among the great nations, only the Raikage of the Cloud liked to appear at the front lines and stir things up deep behind enemy territory. Chiyo skimmed one scroll without looking up. Tell Ibizo to increase efforts. Send more infiltrators into the Land of Fire. Our sources say Konoha's internal situation is unstable. Yes, Lady Chiyo. Embedding spies in rival villages was standard practice, but getting them into high places was hard, and transmitting intelligence during wartime was even harder. After a long pause, Chiyo slammed her palm on the table and shouted the name that haunted her, Tsunade. She wished she could lead a huge force into the land of fire and take revenge, but the sand village lacked that strength. The war had reached a stalemate, and Sakumo Hatake had not shown himself on the battlefield. He remained active inside the land of fire. Chiyo hated him with a white-hot intensity, but she could not act on impulse. Her duty was to direct the campaign from the camp. When the war had first escalated, the sand village had enjoyed some early successes. But once Tsunade came to the front line, the good reports stopped, and bad news began to arrive in steady streams. Chapter 153. Let the bullets fly for a while. First, Tsunade deciphered the new poison Jingi had painstakingly researched. Then she personally led a team onto the battlefield and utterly routed the Sand Village's puppet forces. The Sand's puppets had been their trump card, deployed for long stretches, a terrifying presence that made countless enemies tremble. Against Tsunade, though, they found their nemesis. She was not just a master of healing and detoxification. When needed, she went into battle herself. Her style was blunt and straightforward, and the puppets, designed to counter cunning and precision, were terrified of someone who fought like that. With each punch and kick, wherever she went, only piles of puppet fragments and twisted metal were left behind. No matter how reckless she seemed, Tsunade never put herself in a situation Chiyo could exploit. Grandma Chiyo could not find a single underhanded opportunity to finish her. All she could do was curse through gritted teeth. The fierce fighting at the front lines did not touch Jingi. With an agreement reached with the third Hokage, his life had calmed. He kept his head down, and the third Hokage stopped playing tricks. Orochimaru showed up at the Anbu base and handed over all the completed puppets to Jingi. After paying a sum of chakra, Jingi acquired several hundred puppets. Both parties were pleased. Orochimaru even volunteered to help deal with the demigod's corpse. Jingi handled the poisonous salamander fish himself. Recently, with the Ino Shikacho joining the Anbu, Jingi let Nara Shikaku take over the tedious Anbu paperwork and retreated to his own research. In a makeshift laboratory at the main base, he spread out metals, mechanical parts, various stones, and special soils, his experimental materials. "Are you sure these are all for experiments?" Shikaku asked when he came by to look. He blinked at the scene. In his mind, puppet research should be a little more macabre. Puppets needed corpses as a base. Here, though, there was no blood, only metal bits on the floor and piles of mud and rock. "You're planning to make puppets out of these?" Shikaku thought. "Your puppets were odd enough already. Now you're using stones too? If the Sand Village's puppeteers saw this, they'd probably cry." "Of course," Jingi replied. "Who said you couldn't make puppets from stone and mud? The Otsutsuki on the moon had used wooden, mud, and stone puppets. Anything goes if you understand how to shape it. They'd had the legacy of Hamura. Jingi did not. He could only experiment slowly and learn by trial and error. Fortunately, he had time. The puppets he already owned were sufficient for now. He could build more later." Shikaku watched for a while at the lab's entrance, then turned and left, baffled. In his opinion, Jingi was wasting his time, neglecting Anbu affairs to toy with useless experiments. If different metals and parts made puppets, what were stones and mud for? He couldn't picture it. It would be comical if Jingi finished one only for an enemy's water release to wash it into a heap of mush. He blamed Orochimaru's influence. That man always chased strange research, and now Jingi had picked up the habit. Being this kid's assistant was truly his misfortune. Jingi buried himself in his work and didn't emerge for a long stretch. Fortunately, the village had been quiet, and Shikaku handled the Anbu's daily business, so Jingi could focus on his experiments. "It's not working?" he muttered one day, watching a strangely shaped puppet move stiffly and awkwardly. His research had progressed, but the results were disappointing. Then cheers echoed through the base. Jingi sent a small puppet to the roof to investigate. Sakumo Hake had returned and received a warm welcoming from the villagers. The village's propaganda had worked. Sakumo's reputation in Konoha had risen, and the F4's plan to promote him and overshadow Jingi had succeeded. Mention the war heroes, and most villagers' first reaction was Sakumo's name. The F4 were experts at shaping public opinion. From his rooftop vantage, Jingi watched Sakumo leave surrounded by villagers and wondered privately whether the third Hokage and the others would still be able to smile when the daimyo's reward arrived. With someone like Sakumo at the forefront, he asked Orochimaru, "Ready with your research?" Orochimaru watched the departing reception party and shook his head. "Not yet. The front is tense. The third Hokage hopes I'll finish my vacation and go back out there." Jingi laughed. "What, you jealous?" "Jealous?" Orochimaru tilted his head. "Perhaps. Who wouldn't enjoy being cheered by the village? I'm no exception. Still, Sakumo-sensei's reputation is a bit exaggerated, don't you think? Even by military merit, Sakumo wouldn't necessarily eclipse Jingi. He'd accomplished a lot. Slaying one Hanzo of the Salamander was no small thing, and being stationed in the camp's medical room to treat the wounded counted as significant contribution. By many measures, he'd earned as much recognition as those who fought at the front. Yet the larger rewards and attention had gone elsewhere. Anyone else might be gnawed by jealousy. "I don't care," Jingi said lightly. "I'm more interested in the fallout. Sakumo's merits have already been reported to the daimyo. I'm curious how the daimyo will reward him." "What does the village's internal business have to do with the daimyo?" Orochimaru said after a beat, then smiled as he connected the dots. "Heh, now that you mention it, I'm getting curious too. I wonder if the third Hokage will be furious." They laughed together for a moment before Jingi composed himself. "When do you leave the village?" "Probably tomorrow," Orochimaru said, smiling. Chapter 154. I understand, but I don't fully understand of Ford. The third Hokage had recently gone back to see Orochimaru, hoping to tug at whatever remained of the man's conscience and coax him into helping the village. Orochimaru, however, was immovable. He said he could end his leave and even go to the front lines, but the village must not covet his experimental materials. Having failed again to obtain the puppets, the third Hokage left fuming and urged Orochimaru to head to the battlefield as soon as possible. Coincidentally, Orochimaru had also been planning a trip to the front. With the war dragging on, the frontline camps would have accumulated many corpses, prime materials for puppet making. He did not know that Jingi had already begun work collecting puppet materials. By the time Orochimaru returned, Jingi might no longer be interested in puppets made from shinobi corpses. Orochimaru knew Jingi was doing experiments, but he didn't know the specifics. His reach didn't extend into the Anbu. With puppets stationed to guard the village, not even Orochimaru, and certainly not the F4, could properly penetrate Anbu-level secrecy. That night, after finishing his duties, Jingi ran into an unexpected guest on the way home. "Do you have time? Let's eat together," Sakumo Hake said, taking the initiative. Sure, it was hard to refuse a meal. If he declined, Sakumo knew he'd overthink everything. Jingi understood why Sakumo had asked him out. They ended up at the Akimichi clan's barbecue restaurant. They ordered a lot. When the food arrived, Sakumo put the marinated meat on the grill and managed a sheepish smile. "Jingi, I've always appreciated what you've done. Honestly, I can't compare to you, but I don't understand how things ended up like this." Sakumo had felt good when he returned to the village earlier, but after resting and asking around, unease had crept in. Why was Jingi's contribution being ignored while everyone praised Sakumo? He was a blunt, honest man. He remembered how Jingi had saved his life in the Land of Rain. He'd come to explain that he had nothing to do with whatever politics were happening. "Don't be upset, senior," Jingi said, waving a hand with a wry smile as Sakumo fumbled for words. "This really has nothing to do with you. It's all the Hokage office. Don't take it to heart. Besides, you're already a hero in the village. The warm welcome and support you're getting is deserved." "My contributions are nothing compared to yours," Sakumo said with an awkward laugh. The rest of the village might be swayed by propaganda and public opinion, but he wasn't fooled. He knew how crucial Jingi's work had been. Slaying Hanzo alone would earn anyone his respect. He remembered how, on the battlefield in the Land of Rain, Hanzo had relentlessly pursued him and Jingi had treated his wounds. Flipping the meat with a puzzled expression, Sakumo asked, "But why would the Hokage do this?" They couldn't get the puppets from Orochimaru, so they didn't want my reputation to get too large, Jingi replied, taking a sip of his drink and smacking his lips. It so happens they spread the story that you killed Grandma Chio's son and daughter-in-law, promoted you heavily, and used that publicity to suppress me. Is that so? Sakumo's face fell. He still couldn't believe it came down to puppets, that fellow villagers would manipulate things so. They were supposed to be on the same side in wartime, cooperating for the village's survival, not turning on each other. To be used as a political tool made him feel helpless. He was relieved, though, that Jingi didn't take it personally or resent him. That made the dinner worth it. A straightforward man like Sakumo held favors in high regard. Jingi had saved him multiple times, and that stayed with him. Seeing the meat was cooked, Jingi didn't fuss. He picked up a piece and started eating. Senior, you don't need to be troubled. These matters originally had nothing to do with you or the Hatake clan. On the surface, the conflict between me and the Hokage office looks like it's about puppets, but it actually started long before the war. Sakumo nodded with a rueful smile. He could fight and kill without hesitation, but politics and tangled interests made his head spin. I suppose I'm only suited to fighting, he said, chuckling at himself. That's just different strengths, Jingi said, amused. As you get older, you learn to adapt. Sakumo was honest and straightforward, but that kind of person could be easy prey in political games. He wasn't incapable of managing a household or wielding influence. He was simply prone to being targeted. Someone like him needed a patron and a quiet position in the background. Anything more invited ruin. Rumors could crush him. In all of Konoha, he felt like the kind of Anbu-level warrior who could be undone by whispers. His son Kakashi tended to overthink, but he understood people better than his father did. I hope so, Sakumo said, shaking his head to stop the conversation from going further. He contentedly ate the barbecue, and the topic shifted to the battlefield. The Sand Shinobi used terrible tactics, he grumbled. They didn't just raid villages in the Land of Fire, they looted and destroyed everywhere. If they couldn't carry off the supplies and valuables, they burned them all. During the encirclement in the Land of Fire, Sakumo had seen too much tragedy. The Sand had already plundered villages in the Land of Rain, taking everything that wasn't nailed down and leaving people to fend for themselves. When they entered the Land of Fire and found Konoha's encirclement, knowing they couldn't take everything, they set the stolen supplies ablaze. They left the attacked villages with nothing. I've reported it to the Hokage, Sakumo said. Hokage-sama promised the village would strike back. But retaliation had stalled for months. Jingi didn't expect much to change. At first, the F4 couldn't find a suitable target. Tsunade grew impatient and tried to push Jingi's suggestion forward, but the others balked. The idea was proposed and then shelved, and Tsunade was furious about that. Perhaps, Jingi said, not wanting to dwell on it, and decisively shifted the conversation away. Chapter 155. Danzo threatens the third Hokage. The third Hokage carried the weight of his office with him, but age had worn away some of the decisive fire he once had. The shinobi hero had become a man who hesitated at the slightest provocation, and one word from another could unsettle him. After Jingi and Sakumo Hatake had eaten and drunk their fill, they left and went home. Late into the night, Konoha prison sank into silence. The laboring prisoners returned quietly to their cells. In a solitary cell deep within the complex, Hiruzen Sarutobi stood outside the bars, looking down at his old ally, Danzo Shimura. Sarutobi, Danzo said, voice tight with restrained anger, you haven't kept your promise. Hiruzen sighed. He had promised during the outbreak of the war that he would find a way to get Danzo released, but the war had dragged on, and Danzo remained locked away. Things are more complicated than you know, Danzo, Hiruzen answered softly, then explained the recent dealings, how tensions had flared, and how he'd had to negotiate to prevent a wider disaster. At the mention of that, Danzo's face twisted into fury. So you let them send Anbu to surround the Shimura? Danzo barked. Sarutobi, how did you become Hokage? You can't even control the Anbu. Hiruzen had been forced to parley with Jingi to defuse the situation. A costly compromise had been paid to stop the Anbu from hostile action against Danzo's supporters. The settlement ended the immediate conflict, but the fact that Hiruzen had bargained left Danzo incandescent with rage. This is not my fault, Danzo snapped. Don't pin everything on me. Hiruzen's own temper frayed. If I hadn't acted to help Koharu, the Anbu wouldn't have been split off. This sort of thing is unprecedented among the 5 great shinobi countries. Danzo slammed his hands against the bars until his knuckles were white. And what about me? You'll send men and make concessions for that idiot Utane Koharu, but you leave me rotting in here? How does that make sense? Are my contributions worth nothing? Danzo's words cut deeper than he intended. Among the old guard, Senju Tobarama's students and their peers, Danzo believed himself to have been one of the village's greatest pillars, perhaps behind only the most prominent leaders, certainly above Mitokado, Torifu, and Koharu. Yet when the spoils were divided, he had been pushed aside and relegated to the shadows. Torifu had renounced his claim to bolster his clan. Koharu and Mitokado had taken their shares. Uchiha Kagami was simply ignored. Furiously, Danzo accused Hiruzen of favoring the Elder Council and abandoning him. Danzo, Hiruzen said, lighting his pipe and drawing on it slowly, it's no use unloading your anger on me. If you hadn't targeted Hyuga Jingi and Kushina and provoked Lady Mito, we wouldn't be in this mess. Danzo's eyes flashed. Everything I do is for the village. Hiruzen's gaze went cool and steady. He knew the line all too well. He had used the same argument on others when duty demanded hard choices. So have I, he said simply, leaving the accusation to hang between them. The stare from Hiruzen seemed to shame Danzo into a deeper rage. Sarutobi, Danzo hissed, are you telling me you won't free me? What are you implying, Danzo? Hiruzen asked. He sensed a hidden meaning behind Danzo's demand. Danzo paced inside the cell, voice dropping low and dangerous. You know exactly what I mean. Don't push me. We're 2 sides of the same coin. You in the light, me in the shadows. I know what you've done. Don't force me. He would not have chosen to threaten his old friend, but being left to rot while others prospered gnawed at him. Danzo had tried every route, loyalty, silence, sacrifice, but none had earned him the recognition he craved. If he remained in the gutters, he feared the villagers would never accept him. His dream of one day leading the village would be crushed. Sarutobi, what do you think would happen if the village learned the truth about Kagami? Danzo's voice became a low, unpleasant whisper. Hiruzen's pupils shrank. Few knew the exact circumstances of Uchiha Kagami's death. It was a matter few dared touch, an unspoken wound among the old disciples of Tobirama. Kagami had been among the strongest. The fact that he alone had died while his peers survived invited dangerous questions. The very suggestion of exposing that secret felt like a blade at Hiruzen's throat. You shouldn't go down that road, Hiruzen said, a tremor in his voice that was anger trying to hide fear. There are things best left buried. Danzo did not want to hurl the village into chaos. He knew Orochimaru's bitter truth. Men who lived in the gutters could never win the hearts of the people. If the villagers shunned him, his dream of being Hokage would die. But the relentless injustice had pushed him to the edge. I don't want to destroy everything, Danzo said, turning away from Hiruzen so he wouldn't see the tremor of vulnerability. But I can't stand by forever. The village is at war, and I understand the pressures you face. I can be patient, but only so long. Release me, or I'll do something you won't like. Remember this, you have 1 year. He left the ultimatum hanging like a dagger. He would not sever ties completely. Danzo still clung to hope that Hiruzen might find a way to make things right. If Hiruzen released him within a year, Danzo could bear losses and slights. But if nothing changed, if the village's justice remained blind to his service, then the filth in the gutters might fight back, and the consequences could be devastating. Chapter 156. Why should he carry 3 people's burdens alone? If he doesn't get out, then don't blame me for being impolite. The 3rd Hokage had gone to see Danzo that night, worried, and come back in a fury. It was late, but instead of going home to sleep, he returned to the Hokage office and began pacing. He sent for Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado at once. Why should he shoulder a burden that belonged to all of them? Both elders were roused from bed, bewildered, and hurried over. During wartime, a summons from the Hokage demanded that you get up no matter how tired you were. Hiruzen, is there some change on the front? Homura asked as they sat. The 3rd Hokage rubbed his face and let out a long sigh. The front line hadn't deteriorated. Konoha's positions held firm, and the Sand Village, short on supplies, could not hope to outlast them. Still, Hiruzen looked strained. "I went to speak with Danzo," he said finally. "He is furious about the Anbu reassignment. He warned me. He's given us 1 year to release him, or he'll expose the matter of Uchiha Kagami." What? The words hit like a blow. Both Koharu and Homura sprang up, faces white with disbelief. Danzo Shimura was in prison, and now he was making threats? If that matter came out, especially in wartime, the damage to village morale would be catastrophic. Hiruzen watched them react and felt for a moment the wariness drain away. Their shock proved the gravity of the threat. "You all know Danzo," Hiruzen continued. "When he says 1 year, he means exactly 1 year. If we don't—" He stopped. There was no benefit in outlining worst-case scenarios. Both elders understood what he left unsaid. "I'll go see him," Koharu said before she could stop herself. Homura grabbed her sleeve. "Koharu, you can't. If Danzo sees you, he'll only get angrier. He's already unbalanced because of this imprisonment. Going there now would make things worse." Koharu hesitated. "Then what do we do? We want to release him, but Tsunade and Hyuga Jingi will never agree. If Danzo is freed, who knows what their reaction will be? Besides," Homura added, "why is Danzo threatening us? This whole mess started because of him." It was a stalemate of accusations. Koharu blamed Danzo for provoking trouble. Danzo blamed the third for favoring the two elders. Hiruzen, caught between them, felt the pressure grow. "Enough, Koharu," Hiruzen said, cutting her off gently but firmly. "We still need to find a way to get Danzo out. His influence, his knowledge of covert matters, is vital to our operations. Since his arrest, I've found myself second-guessing every move." "So we have to persuade Tsunade and Hyuga Jingi," Homura said. "Especially Jingi. If he agrees, Tsunade might follow." The three fell into a grim discussion: how to convince stubborn Tsunade and implacable Jingi, how to manage public opinion if Danzo was released, how to limit the fallout if Danzo stuck to his threat. The puppets' dispute from before only made things worse. Everyone knew how heated that conflict had been. They talked until the sky paled. Exhausted, they adjourned with no clear solution, promising to reconvene. The third Hokage, older and sleep-deprived, felt faint from hours without rest. He was just about to leave when his secretary entered with a paper in hand. "Hokage-sama, here is the copy of today's meeting agenda. Shall I place it in the conference room?" Hiruzen stared blankly at the sheet. "Put it out there. I'll be right there." There was another meeting. No rest for any of them. Koharu and Homura had only just returned home, barely having closed their eyes, when they were summoned back again. Utterly weary, they dragged themselves to the Hokage office. By the time Hyuga Jingi arrived for the meeting, fresh, well-fed, and oddly chipper, he immediately felt the strained atmosphere in the conference room. Looking up at the head table, he blinked. The three pillars of the village, Hiruzen, Koharu, and Homura, sat slumped and haggard, wearing exhaustion like a second skin. "Senior," Jingi whispered, nudging the broad man beside him with an elbow. "What's wrong with those three? They look like they're about to drop dead." Akimichi Torafu nearly choked on his laughter. It was blunt, tactless, and completely Jingi. Still, Torafu couldn't help smiling. He was curious as much as amused about what on earth had kept the elders up and made them look so hopelessly worn out. The meeting began, the three elders holding on by sheer will. The problem remained unsolved. Danzo's threat loomed like a sword over the village, and no one yet had a plan that would satisfy Tsunade, Jingi, and the need for stability. Chapter 157, Hinata Hiyashi's Sincerity. Cough! Cough! Now that everyone is here, the meeting will begin. Please take a look at the documents on the table. With everyone present, the third Hokage called the meeting to order. It followed the usual routine, short on novelty. Since the war had escalated, these strategy meetings had become a regular occurrence every few days, but the topics never strayed far from the front lines. Boring and repetitive, as Jingi would have put it. Akimichi Torafu, true to form, nearly dozed off. Jingi leaned back in his chair, distracted, his thoughts wandering elsewhere. Only Hyuga Hiyashi and Uchiha Fugaku, who sat behind him, listened with full attention. A simple meeting stretched on for over 3 hours before it finally adjourned. If not for the Anbu's requirement that he send a representative, Jingi would have gladly buried himself in his lab to tinker with puppet materials rather than waste his time there. Jingi, would you like to grab a bite and talk? Hiyashi asked as they stood to leave. Jingi rose immediately. Sure, a free meal at mealtime was always welcome. He suspected why Hiyashi had invited him. This persistent Hyuga leader had hardly given up, but he didn't push for explanations. Outside the Akimichi barbecue restaurant, Jingi hesitated. Could we change the place? Hiyashi blinked. The Akimichi clan's barbecue is one of the best in the village. That's not what I mean. Jingi hurried to explain. I've eaten barbecue for days straight. I'd like something different. Not that the Akimichi barbecue isn't good, just too much in a row. Lately, everyone had been inviting him out to eat. Orochimaru, Fugaku, Sakumo Hatake, and now Hiyashi had all chosen barbecue. Jingi felt numb with repetition. Hiyashi agreed without objection and led him to another restaurant. Once seated, Hiyashi opened the conversation. Hyuga has given you a lot of trouble lately. Jingi nearly choked. Rolling his Byakugan reflexively, he crossed his legs and sipped hot tea. He wasn't used to sitting formally. Cut the pleasantries. Hyuga is very cute, and I like her a lot. But I've been wondering, how did you and the elders manage to push someone from the main family forward like that? Pushing a main family member into a political match was unheard of for the Hyuga. In the past, at most, they might pick a branch family girl. Yet Hiyashi had managed to do something unprecedented. It was my suggestion, Hiyashi said quietly. My father accepted it and convinced the other elders. So it had been Hiyashi's idea. He'd persuaded the old clan head, who in turn had persuaded the elders. As a single young clan head, Hiyashi couldn't have done it alone. I heard Hyuga was being groomed to be the future clan head's wife, Jingi said. Hiyashi's expression was calm. Compared to arranging a wife, your help to the clan is more important. Jingi stared. The man who could become young clan head was clearly remarkable. But could Hiyashi afford to shift his marital plans? If Hiyashi took another wife for political reasons, would he still have a Hinata? And Fugaku, if he did the same, would Mikoto's children, Itachi and Sasuke, still be the same? Genetics and face mattered. Mikoto's looks had done much to shape public perception. Jingi could see the tangled implications. You're persistent, Jingi said with a kind of wry admiration. Hiyashi kept seeking his counsel, invited him to meals, kept trying to bridge a gap, and if rebuffed, tried again. I won't flatter you. If you truly want to change the clan but can't touch the curse mark or the inheritance rules, you need to start with how the branch family are treated and with the main family's arrogance. Why is the main branch conflict so deep? Hiyashi asked. Apart from the caged bird curse mark, the biggest reason is how poorly the branch family are treated and how haughty the main family acts. They don't even see the branch family as full people. Resentment builds naturally. If you want real change in the Hyuga, start there. Hiyashi didn't have the power to alter the caged bird curse mark, nor could he overturn the clan's inheritance traditions overnight. So the only workable path was to chip away at other things, temper the main family's arrogance, raise the branch family's status and daiju. Achieve those, and the rift would shrink. Will that really help? Hiyashi asked, hopeful but cautious. Jingi raised an eyebrow. Why not? Hiyashi's caution was understandable. From what I've seen, the main family has always been arrogant. Even you, young clan head, carry that air sometimes. Lowering your stance a bit won't make the main family look weak. Look at other clans, the Uchiha, for example. Hiyashi bristled slightly at the comparison. To the Hyuga, the Uchiha were rivals, hardly a model, but the example fit. Does treating others as equals make people look down on them? Why is Fugaku so popular and respected in his clan? Jingi asked. He doesn't put on airs. He interacts with clan members as equals. That kind of consistent, humble behavior earns recognition and support over time. Hiyashi reflected. He believed such change was desirable, but feared the other main family members wouldn't allow him to act that way. They wouldn't follow his lead easily. There is no but, Jingi said firmly. Chapter 158. Breaking the limitations. The experiment is successful. Jingi cut him off. If you can't even do this much, then I suggest you go back to whatever you're doing. Don't fool yourself with ideas of overturning the clan. He went on, more calmly. If you're determined, start with a small goal. Persuade the old clan head and the main family elders to lower their attitude a bit and treat their clansmen more fairly. That won't diminish the main family's status. Having said what needed to be said, Jingi fell silent. He finished his meal in quiet, then excused himself and left, leaving Hyuga Hiyashi alone in the private room to think. Those at the top could never truly see the lives of those below. Only by lowering oneself could one understand them. If Hyuga Hiyashi could steel his resolve, easing the divisions between main and branch families was not impossible. A total reconciliation, however, was out of reach. As long as the caged bird curse mark existed, that wound could not be fully healed. Back home, Hyuga Hiyashi found his father resting and knelt on the straw mat to recount Jingi's advice in detail. The Hyuga clan head listened carefully. When his son finished, he said, "The arrogance of the main family has truly blinded us. I can see why Jingi harbors such resentment toward them." Hyuga Hiyashi sat motionless, like a statue. His father continued, voice heavy with feeling, "Even without the curse, the main family's pride alone has bred countless grievances in the branch family. They've gone too far." Between improving the branch family's treatment and persuading main family members to humble themselves, the first was far more achievable. If Hayashi and his father pushed reasonably, even reluctant main family members could be forced to acquiesce. Convincing those used to standing on high to genuinely lower themselves was another matter, far harder. Even if the Hyuga clan head personally intervened, he could not sway everyone in the main family. For them, that demand felt more extreme than ousting Hyuga-mi. "Let's start by improving the branch family's treatment. That's doable," the clan head decided. "Yes, father." Although Hyuga Hiyashi had some autonomy as the young clan head, so long as his father lived, he could not claim full control. Even if he eventually became clan head, main family figures would still constrain him. Jingi had always been skeptical, almost dismissive, of Hiyashi's ambitions to reform the clan. Hiyashi himself was one of those high-ranking members. How could he change the system when he lacked absolute authority? Fortunately, the Hyuga clan head was willing to support his son. Convincing the main family to change their mindset was beyond them, but improving the branch family's treatment was achievable. Father and son worked together, and after several months, managed to win reluctant agreement from the main family. It took time and effort, but the small change was secured. At the Ambu base, Jingi inspected the puppet before him and finally allowed himself a satisfied smile. After months of experimentation and countless materials, he had synthesized a suitable clay for puppets. That meant he could move into mass production. Raw materials would no longer be the bottleneck. The clay was cheap to produce. He wouldn't have to keep buying exotic parts or using puppets made from corpses. Months passed, and the village remained much the same. The shadow of war still hung over it. Even the New Year cheer could not dispel it. "Senior, are you slacking off?" Nara Shikaku asked, blowing on his tea and frowning. Jingi had handed most of the work to Nara Shikaku, and the older man was no fool. He couldn't do everything himself. As more Ino Shikacho members joined the Anbu, he had enough reliable hands to delegate to, so he distributed the tasks among his family and settled into the role of a leisurely elder who sipped tea and watched events unfold. Seeing Jingi grinning, Nara Shikaku said, "You look pleased. Did your experiment succeed?" "It did," Jingi said, stretching in his chair and propping his feet on the desk, drawing an annoyed look from Shikaku. "From now on, funding and materials won't limit my puppet work, and I won't have to keep using puppets made from corpses." Long-term association with corpses ruined reputations. The Sand Village's puppeteers were notorious for that. Orochimaru's dealings with corpses had already sparked ugly rumors. Nara Shikaku sighed. "Even if corpses have utility, it's better to let them rest after use. Relying on them will drag your name through the mud." "It'll even affect Tsunade Hime," Jingi agreed. "And it gives other people opportunities to take advantage," Shikaku added. Jingi didn't care much about gossip, but saving money and protecting his reputation were both wins. The one who would be most displeased was Orochimaru. Jingi's new synthetic clay meant their cooperation was over. After chatting a bit longer with Nara Shikaku, Jingi slipped away. After so many months in the lab, he sorely needed a hot spring to relax. He didn't have Orochimaru's obsessive dedication. Without tangible progress, he wouldn't have stayed in the lab so long. "Good, very good." Jiraiya clapped his hands in a remote valley of the land of rain, smiling as he encouraged his three disciples. Under his care, the trio who would later form the Akatsuki were developing rapidly. Nagato, who possessed the Rinnegan, stood out most of all. Jiraiya-sensei, how did we do? Konan ran up to Jiraiya, eyes wide and hopeful for praise. Ha ha ha, you did very well. Jiraiya ruffled Konan's hair, then turned to Yahiko and Nagato. You two performed beyond my expectations. I wouldn't be surprised if you match my other disciples. At the mention, Jiraiya's thoughts drifted to Nawaki. He wondered how much the boy had improved under Jingi's guidance. Chapter 159, A Request for Protection from the Daimyo. While missing him, Jiraiya also had a headache, wondering how to explain things to Nawaki when he returned to the village. He really was an irresponsible teacher. Another disciple? Konan asked curiously. Half a year had passed, and the three children who would one day become the Akatsuki's core had slowly emerged from the shadow of losing their family and home. Jiraiya was good at teaching, and even better at comforting broken spirits. Teacher, what kind of person is he? Konan pressed. Jiraiya chuckled. Him? How should I put it? He's a lot like me. As he thought back, Jiraiya realized Nawaki really was similar. Carefree, lecherous, forgetful, blunt to a fault, always saying the wrong thing and getting his head banged for it. Then, teacher, will you abandon us? Konan's voice trembled at the thought. Mentioning another disciple put Konan on edge. She feared Jiraiya would leave the land of rain altogether. Nato and Yahiko looked uneasy too. Nagato even looked up, unself-consciously risking exposure of his Rinnegan, though Jiraiya already knew. No, Jiraiya said gently. He understood their fear and smiled to reassure them. Just study hard. Leave the rest to your teacher. Jiraiya wanted to go back to the land of fire, to Konoha, but he knew he couldn't, not yet. The three were still too young. If he left them behind in the chaotic land of rain, they would struggle to survive. Even with the war over, the rain was far from peaceful. It had become a haven for rogue ninja and desperate fugitives, a perfect hiding place for dangerous people. Because the war had happened earlier in this timeline, Konan, Nagato, and Yahiko were younger than in the original story, so Jiraiya had to stay longer to make sure they had a chance to grow up safely. Only poor Nawaki had yet to receive proper guidance from his teacher. Perhaps by the time Jiraiya could return, Nawaki wouldn't need him anymore. It was no joke, Nawaki had already participated in and passed the Chunin exam after the new year. Under Jiraiya's plan, Nawaki would probably take the Jonin exam in 3 to 4 years. Jiraiya didn't bother with the special Jonin rank. The division there caused more trouble than it was worth. It was better to skip it and go straight for Jonin. Of course, ordinary young ninja didn't get such favorable pacing, but Nawaki was not ordinary. As for the blonde boy, Minato Namikaze, Jiraiya didn't worry at all. With Minato receiving one-on-one training from his teacher, his development had been astonishing. He was the sort of student who took off like a rocket. Nawaki watched in envy. If Minato kept accelerating at that rate, he might soon surpass Nawaki. The thought made Nawaki anxious. He could accept being outpaced by pure talent, but to be overtaken by someone younger felt unacceptable. So Nawaki worked harder. He cut down on foolish pastimes, reined in his carefree ways, and trained diligently. Kushina had been lax about training at first, especially after realizing she couldn't catch up to Minato. Her effort had slackened. Seeing Nawaki and Minato pushing themselves every day made her uneasy, and she, too, forced herself back into serious training. Minato welcomed Kushina's renewed effort, but Nawaki felt his chance to stand out shrinking. One Minato was more than enough. Why did Kushina have to join the race? Unwilling to lose face, Nawaki only trained harder. Their efforts paid off. The three children improved at an astonishing rate, far beyond others their age. Jiraiya was pleased. Their rapid growth eased many of his worries. Sir, Hokage-sama requests your presence. On a new morning, as soon as Jiraiya stepped out of his house, men from the Hokage guard platoon appeared. Since the Anbu had been pulled back from regular duty, the third Hokage had restructured the village's protection. The Hokage guard platoon was now responsible for the Hokage's safety and errands. The Hokage office was essentially guarded by these new teams. The Anbu had been withdrawn. Jiraiya approved of the change, no need for a permanent Anbu presence at the office, and besides, the Hokage had made his decision. "Did he say what it's about?" Jiraiya asked the messenger. The runner shook his head. "This subordinate does not know." "All right, then." Jiraiya did not press him. He walked to the Hokage office at a calm pace, the platoon trailing behind. He climbed to the second floor, pushed open the office door, and entered. "Hokage-sama, is there something you need me for?" Jiraiya asked. The third Hokage wasted no time. "This is a protection request from a daimyo's residence. It will likely require Anbu personnel." He handed Jiraiya a sealed scroll from the daimyo's office. "Protection mission?" Jiraiya glanced at him. "The daimyo's own forces should be enough. Konoha has also stationed guards in the residence. Besides, who would dare attack a daimyo? Moving against a daimyo invites an endless feud." The third Hokage shook his head. "It's not a daimyo of the Land of Fire. It's the daimyo of the Land of Yu." Jiraiya opened the seal and read, "With Hanzo of the Salamander, the warlord, dead, the war in the Land of Rain had come to an end, and Konoha's forces had withdrawn. But Konoha's retreat had only made things worse. The Land of Rain had become even more chaotic, a magnet for rogue ninja and dangerous people. The seething instability made a protection request from outside the Land of Fire a far more serious matter than it sounded. The entire Land of Rain had fallen into chaos, and the Unokuni daimyo was growing desperate. Under ordinary circumstances, a daimyo did not leave his domain, but these were not ordinary times. Desperate outlaws and rogue ninja fleeing village pursuits had poured into the Land of Rain. No one could predict what desperate acts they might commit if pushed too far. At the end of his tether, the Unokuni daimyo turned to his relative, the Land of Fire daimyo, asking for protection. He refused to abandon his land. Exile would mean a life of humiliation, so requesting protection became his only option. For such a mission, the logical choice was the Anbu. The third Hokage therefore approached Jingyi and asked him to take it on. Jingyi closed the sealing scroll, put it away, and listened. "Should we send people directly?" he asked. The third Hokage shook his head. "I think it would be better if you went in person, arrange the protection, and meet with the Unokuni daimyo on behalf of the village." To meet another country's daimyo, Konoha needed to send someone of sufficient rank. The third Hokage could not afford to leave the village, and the Elder Council was otherwise occupied. After a quick mental calculation, the third Hokage realized Jingyi was the best choice. Jingyi hesitated only a moment before answering. "All right, tomorrow I will lead 3 Anbu squads to the Land of Rain and leave them there to protect the Unokuni daimyo. 3 squads would be enough. The daimyo would foot the bill for their expenses and pay Konoha protection fees. It was not unreasonable for the Anbu to dispatch a few squads on such a mission. Once the assignment was confirmed, Jingyi turned to leave. "Wait," the third Hokage called, raising a hand. Jingyi paused and glanced back. "Is there something else?" "Could you find Jiraiya?" the third asked. "Tell him to return to the village as soon as possible. The village needs him." Jingyi considered for a moment and agreed. He had his own reason to find Jiraiya, if only to see him, so delivering the message was no burden. As long as the third Hokage didn't complicate matters, Jingyi saw no reason to make an enemy of the Sannin. He left the Hokage's office and went to the Anbu base. "Tiger," he said, "pick 3 squads. Tomorrow they follow me to the Land of Rain. For the foreseeable future, those squads will remain there to protect the Unokuni daimyo." "Yes, sir." Tiger asked no questions and set about selecting 3 appropriate squads. This was a protection mission. Reliability mattered. Konoha could not afford the shame of sending guards who would fail and allow the daimyo to be harmed. In addition to the 3 visible squads, Jingyi planned to leave a puppet squad behind, an unseen safeguard. He still wondered where Jiraiya might be hiding in the Land of Rain. Jiraiya was avoiding the village's summons, unwilling to be pressured back home, but he couldn't abandon the 3 youngsters who depended on him in the rain-swept country. Jingyi could not simply leave them to fend for themselves. The next day, after packing their gear, Jingyi put Kushina, Nawaki, and Little Yellow Hair under orders and led his people out of Konoha. Unburdened by a large convoy, they made good time, crossing most of the Land of Fire in a day and a half, stopping overnight at the frontline camp, and then striking into the Land of Rain. They found disorder at every turn. A middle-aged couple knelt in muddy rain, pleading for the few scraps a pair of house-robbing ninja had left behind. "Please, leave us some food. Without food, the children won't survive," the wife begged. The two intruders ignored her. One held a samurai sword and the other carried the stolen goods, and both were set on leaving quickly. Then two shuriken cut through the rain, nearly invisible in the downpour, and struck one of the thieves. He screamed and crumpled. His companion froze and looked around in panic. A ring of black-armored, masked figures had closed in. Konoha Ambu. In a desperate bid to flee, the robber dropped his spoil and made a break for it, but a silver blade flashed and slit his throat. Blood sprayed into the mud. The trembling couple pressed themselves together, too terrified to speak, only silently praying they would not be harmed. The soft squelch of footsteps in wet earth grew closer. Jingji walked up under an umbrella and looked down at the two dead men. "How many incidents is this now?" he asked. "Sir," the squad leader at his side replied, "this is the 6th. He had expected disorder, but not this scale. The aftermath of war had left the Land of Rain a magnet for rogue ninja, survivors of the ruined Rain Village, and assorted desperados from across the borders. Hanzo's death had not only ended the conflict, it had effectively broken the Rain Village. Those who had once been its defenders were now fugitives or mercenaries, and many others who had been displaced by the war had turned violent. The result was a level of lawlessness that exceeded Jingi's worst expectations. "Leave some food," Jingi said, and walked on. The squad leader swiftly placed a waterproof pack of supplies at the couple's feet and signaled the Ambu to move out. The stunned pair stared after them until the figures were gone, only then fumbling to their feet and clutching the food like a miracle. Few of their neighbors would be so lucky. Jingi did not head straight for the daimyo's residence. He dispersed numerous puppets across the Land of Rain to search for Jiraiya and to map the general situation. The reports that flowed back were grim. Many former Rain ninja had become rogues. During the war, countless other shinobi had slipped into lawlessness and remained. In less than a day in the country, Jingi's teams had already run into 6 separate home invasions. The scale of the crisis was staggering.